Hey, welcome to another video. Being we're coming up on the holidays, I thought I'd offer some information about the different lenses that I use for the Nikon Z system. Maybe you're looking to pick one up for Christmas and you just want, another opinion on a lens. I thought I would do a quick video about that. The first thing I have to say is, I guess, a disclaimer. For what I use my lenses for could be something totally different than what you would need a lens for. And so my choices in lenses may not be your choices in lenses. So just understand that. Even in the past, like out of these lenses here, I don't have a 70 to 200 2.8. If I was still shooting sports, I would. I don't have the 100 to 400. Nikon S lens. If I was still shooting sports, I probably would. So just keep that in mind when I talk about different lenses. The very first lens that I did buy for when I switched over to the mirrorless, I switched over at first to the Nikon Z7II, which is what I'm filming on right now. The first lens that I bought was this 20mm 1.8, and I had to decide between that and the 13 or 14 to 30 f4. And the only reason that I really chose this one over the 14 to 30 was I just like the 20mm format. And when I went back and I looked at, even when I had the 16 to 35 when I was shooting with the f lenses, I mostly ended up around 20mm anyway. And then I had a 20mm lens and I tended to opt for that one. So I ended up getting the 20mm. I use this for seascapes, landscapes occasionally, but because I live in South Florida, I bought this lens specifically for seascapes. For whatever reason in 2023, I barely did any. Even the other night we had a full moon and it was a clear night and I probably should have went out and shot the full moon. I didn't do it. I'll hang on to this lens. It's very good for that type of thing. I don't do astrophotography, but from what I understand, this is a good astrophotography lens as well because of the 1.8. It's a very good lens. It's better than the 20mm f lens. Is it worth the upgrade to go mirrorless just to get the upgrade between the f and the s lens? That's up to you depending on your budget. Probably not, but this is the better lens between the two. The next prime lens I have is the 35 1.8. I picked it up recently used. I have only had it for a month or so. I had gotten such a good price on it, it was hard to pass. I figured I'd keep it for a few months, see if I liked it, and then flip it and get my money back for it. Maybe even make a little money because, like I said, I got a very good price on it because it didn't come with the box or anything. I'm more of a 50mm guy. I bought this specifically because I was doing infrared photography and I was starting to do a little street photography, so I bought this lens rather than look at some of the Leica lenses and adapting it, the Leica M lenses and adapting it to the Z. I decided to go this way instead. It's a very good lens. I think the 28 and the 50 are a little bit better. I think the 50 focuses a little bit faster. I think the 50 is just a hair sharper. This is a very good lens. I probably won't keep it just because I tend more towards the 50mm prime look than I do the 35. So if anybody's interested in it, you'll get a good price on it. The next lens, and I did another video on this. This is the Voigtlander 50 f2 Apo lens. And I did a video comparing this to the 50 S lens, which is what I'm filming on. Despite the Nikon 50 S lens being an excellent lens, the 1.8 lens, the one I'm filming on, this is the better lens, the Voigtlander Apo. Is it significantly better? No, but it is better. It's a little bit sharper. I like the punch in the colors a little bit more, but if you go back and watch the video that I did with comparing the two lenses, you'll see why I prefer this lens. Will I sell the Nikon 50mm? I don't know, because I film my videos with it, you know, and so I'll probably keep it just because of that. But when I do go to 50 millimeter format, I typically go with this lens over the Nikon. The only reason I might not, because I'm still not that great at zone focusing. So if I tend to do street photography, I would probably go with the Nikon over this. But if I was shooting landscapes or portraits or something like that, I would use the Voigtlander. This is an excellent lens for the Z. Now this is one designed for the Z system. This isn't a Leica M mount or anything. This is a Nikon Z mount. This is a beautiful lens. Maybe the most, for me anyway, the most underrated S lens out there is the 85-1.8, because you can do so much with it. It's not just a portrait lens, though it's a fantastic portrait lens. I haven't used the 1.2 yet. I probably won't. I know I'm not going to buy it just because of the cost and the weight. The 1.8 for me is sufficient. I mean, I'm not at least at this point, I'm not a professional portrait photographer. I take portraits for friends and mostly my grandkids and family, and it does an amazing job. I've seen on, I forget which forum it was, but some people were complaining that they didn't have a sharp lens. They had a bad copy then, because this is an amazing lens, and it's not just a portrait lens. I've taken this and done street photography with it. I've gone to the beach and just wandered around and took pictures. I did a video just on this as well. So if you want to go back and look through some of my videos, I did one just on this 85-1.8. This is to me, I know some people complain about it. I've seen it. Not me. This is the most underrated S lens I think Nikon makes. This is an amazing lens. I think the third lens that I bought was this 24-200. This is a good lens. Is it the best lens I own? No. Is it a good travel lens? Yes. It's a very good travel lens. I went to Europe with it and got some wonderful images. It's variable aperture, so it goes from f4 to f6.3. So at 200, at 6.3, that's the drawback of this lens. I've tried using it because I just didn't have any other lenses at the time. I've tried shooting my grandkids playing sports with it. It was a little difficult. I got a few decent shots, but it's not a particularly, it's a okay focusing lens. It does the job. Again, if you're using it for travel, it's a great lens. If you're trying to shoot portraits with it, it's okay. The 50 and the 85 would blow this lens away for that kind of thing. But can you get portraits with it? Sure. You can do a lot of things. It's a lens you can do a lot of things with. There's nothing wrong with it per se. It does get a little soft in the corners at 200 and maybe even at 24 if I remember correctly. But at 200 at 6.3, that's probably the drawback to this lens. That at 200 millimeter it will get a little soft, and it's already at 6.3. But overall, it's a good lens. I'm gonna sell it here after the holidays because I'm just not using it anymore, and I'll tell you why I'm not using it in just a second. But when this came out, I probably used it for about a year, and I kept using it until the Nikon 24-120 came out. And once this came out, this is the f4 24-120. Once this came out, I stopped using this one for the most part. And I realized this is 24-120 and doesn't go up to 200. To me, this is the better lens for me, for what I do things for. One of the things that I use this for, and people would be surprised, and again, I've done a video on this type of thing. I photograph a lot of birds with this. Not tiny birds up in the tree. And granted, when I see an osprey up in the tree and it's kind of far away, or even a heron, you know, this isn't the lens to use. I'll give you that. But when they're down in front of me, like I've spoken a few times about my buddy Henry, the heron, who I see quite often down by the lake, I can get within 2-3 feet of him and he's not going to fly away. Now the other blue herons, you get within 15 yards of them and they fly off. But for whatever reason, there's one bird down there that lets me get close to him. Same with the spoonbills. I can get within 5 feet. There's one that I can always get within 5 feet of. The rest of them, you know, they're a lot more skittish. But for those particular birds, this is a great lens. This is a great travel lens. There's a lot of things you can do with this. I've taken portraits with this. F4, you know, depending on your background, is pretty good for portraits. Not F2 and 1.8, of course, is better, and 1.2, of course, is even better if you can nail that focus. To me, this stays on my camera 80% of the time, 75% of the time. This is the lens that I use the most. And then, at least when I'm just walking around, I should say, when I'm just going to go out and walk around the lake or walk around downtown, this is the lens that I use. If I'm going to shoot infrared, which I've been doing a lot of recently, the lens that's on the camera right now, that 50 millimeter 1.8, the Nikon S, that's the go-to lens. If you want to shoot infrared, for me, for my money, that's the lens you use, because you don't get a lot of the hot spots that you get with a bunch of lenses. Like even the Voigtlander, you will get more hot spots than you do with the Nikon. I'm sure it has to do with the coatings of the lenses. The 35, the only reason why I would maybe hang on to this in the future is because it's a pretty good infrared lens. Still not as good as that 50, but it does take good infrared images. You get hot spots occasionally, depending on where you are. You'll probably get it with any lens, really. But that 50, that's the one where I see the least amount of hot spots if you're going to shoot infrared on an infrared camera. Now, if you're going to use a filter, probably will work out the same. I can't guarantee that. For my money, I've tested all these lenses with infrared. The 50 1.8 Nikon S lens, for me, is the go-to lens for infrared. For just walking around and having a lens on your camera, this 24 to 120 is the go-to lens. The last lens that I want to briefly talk about, it's the Tamron 70 to 300. It's a f4.5 to f6.3 lens. It goes to f5 pretty fast. I mean, I think probably even by about 85 to 100 millimeter, it's already at f5. So really it's an f5 to 6.3, and I think by the time you get to about 200 millimeter, it's at 6.3. Comparing it to the Nikon 24 to 200, they're pretty similar. Obviously one is, you know, 70 to 300 and one is 24 to 200, but I'm talking about image quality. They're pretty similar. I'd say the Nikon maybe is a hair better, maybe, but I don't know. You'd have to really pixel peep and look. They're pretty similar. They're pretty close. This, even though I like using it for the birds at the lake a little bit more just because of the reach, instead of going from 24 to 120, I get, you know, the 70 to 300. I would prefer this, but it doesn't focus as fast as that 24 to 120 does. It doesn't pick up the eye for whatever reason. I have a Z8. For whatever reason, if the eye's a little dark, especially if let's say it's a white heron, even with a dark eye, but it's in a little bit of shade, this lens doesn't pick up the eye as quickly as that 24 to 120 does. And it doesn't get the focus. It's a little bit slower to focus than the 24 to 120. Between about 100 and 200 millimeter, maybe 250 millimeter, this is a very nice lens. Even at 70, it's pretty good. When you get out to 300, if you're right at 300, I think the corners get a little fuzzy at times, but it's still, for the value, this is a very good value lens in my opinion. If I was still shooting, say, high school football, I would probably go with the Nikon, the 100 to 400, the Nikon S lens over this lens. But I don't do that anymore. So I don't, again, I've gone back and forth, but that Nikon lens is 3 times the money as what this cost me. And for what I use it for, it just, me personally, it wasn't worth it. Again, if I was being paid, I would use the Nikon 100 to 400 over this lens. But because I'm not, and I'm just kicking around shooting birds and whatever, this is my lens of choice. Overall, which ones do I use? Like I said earlier, the 24 to 120 is probably the one I use the most when I'm just kicking around. If I'm with my family and I want to shoot pictures of my grandkids, this 85-1.8 is on my camera 95% of the time. Well, 80% of the time. 20% of the time is this Voigtlander 50. When I try to do a little street photography and I want to practice my zone focusing. Now, I know there's probably a few people screaming, "Wow, you just put it at f11 and off you go." Yeah, you could, but I still like, my style is, I'd still rather shoot at about f4, f5.6, a little bit tougher to zone focus. You can still do it, obviously, but that's what I use this for. I use it for some portraits and for street. 24 to 120, I use it for walking around the lake. Travel. When I went to Alaska, this was the lens that was on my camera 90% of the time, was this lens. And probably 20% of the time was the Voigtlander 50 f2. I think these were the only 2 lenses that I used when I went to Alaska, and they did me just fine. I don't even think I took the 70 to 300. I might have, but I don't remember using it. If I did, I might have snapped off 5 images or 5 chances or whatever. I know the ones that I ended up using and ended up printing, I think they all came off of this lens. I think 1 came off of this lens. If I were to go on another cruise, say a Viking cruise to Europe or something like that, this 24 to 120 I would definitely take. This Voigtlander I would definitely take. Maybe I would take the 20 millimeter, but that would be it. Because I think that this 24 to 120, for what you get out of a lens, and it takes such nice images. For me, for my use case, this is if I was told I could only have one S lens, this would be the lens I would get. If I could only have one lens, this would be the lens I would get. If I could only have 3, God forbid, then it would be the 50, the Voigtlander 50, and the 85. If I could only have 3 lenses made for the Nikon Z, it would be those 3. If I was a wedding photographer, obviously I'd have to have the 70 to 200, right? So again, it all depends on your use case. But for me, for landscapes, for just walking around the streets, for taking pictures of my grandkids, for occasionally shooting their sporting events, those are the lenses that I've ended up using. I'm sure I'll switch them around. I know there's a debate between some of these Summicron and Summilux lenses and trying to put them on a Z system. I've done a lot of research and talked to a few people about that. Get the Voigtlanders instead. You'll save yourself a lot of money, and the image quality is very close. You could probably get this used for $500 or $600, and the Summicrons and Summiluxes are going to be $3,500. And you really have to pixel peep to see a difference. For me, for value on a Nikon S system or Nikon Z system, the Voigtlanders are an excellent value. This Tamron lens is a very good value. The Voigtlanders are going to take better quality images by a little bit, but as far as value, and then for a lens that you really need to have, it's the 24 to 120 for me. If you're just shooting portraits, it's the 85. Okay, long-winded. Have a happy holiday. Be safe. Take care of yourself. If you learned anything, even if you didn't, just hit like and subscribe. Be nice to me. It's the holidays. Be nice to me. I just did a whole thing on lens porn. You can be nice to me. Like and subscribe. Thanks. See ya.